Imagine for a second a universe where opposites aren't really enemies, but just two sides of the same coin. Today, we're diving into this really powerful idea called the Principle of Polarity. It suggests that behind all of life's big contrasts, there's this hidden unity. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Everything is dual. Everything has poles. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Now that is the core axiom right there. It's a pretty radical statement when you think about it. It's saying that things we see as totally separate are actually connected. This is the fourth of the 7 so-called Hermetic Principles, and trust me, its implications are huge.
All right, so first things first. Let's really break down this law of opposites. What does it actually mean for everything to have this dual nature? At its heart, the whole idea is that polar opposites, light and dark, good and evil, they aren't truly separate things. Nope. Instead, they're just different points on the same spectrum. It's kind of like a dimmer switch, right? They only differ in degree, or what some people call their rate of vibration.
Think about hot and cold. Are they really two separate things? Of course not. They're just different degrees of one single thing, temperature. There's no magical line where hot suddenly becomes cold. It's all one continuum. And the same thing applies to emotions like love and hate. They're just the two poles on the exact same emotional scale.
So, if opposites are connected, does that mean we can actually change our own polarity? Well, this is where the whole idea moves from just being a cool philosophy to something practical. It's a concept they call mental transmutation.
This quote from the book, The Kybalion, really lays out the game plan. The idea is that you can actively change an undesirable mental state, or vibration, just by focusing on its opposite. It's not about trying to crush the feeling, but more about consciously sliding yourself along that scale toward the other pole.
Okay, so how would this work in the real world? Let's say you're feeling a state like fear. Step 1, you identify it. Step 2, you have to recognize its opposite pole, which is courage. Then, by consciously concentrating on what courage feels like, you can, in theory, raise your vibration and actually move from that negative end of the spectrum over to the positive one. Okay, hold on. All of this very practical advice is coming from this book, the Kybalion, which claims these are ancient Hermetic principles. So, we have to ask, where did this book actually come from? Are these teachings really from the ancient world?
See, the Kybalion presents itself as this key to unlocking the philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece. But when you start digging into the actual historical record, a very different and, honestly, a much more interesting story starts to come out.
The actual foundational texts of historical Hermeticism, stuff like the Corpus Hermeticum, they date all the way back to the early centuries CE. But the Kybalion, the book that lays out these 7 principles, that wasn't published until 1912. We're talking about a gap of more than 1,600 years.
Look, the scholarly consensus here is pretty clear. The Kybalion is a modern work. It was published anonymously by the 3 initiates, but its authorship is now pretty much universally attributed to a guy named William Walker Atkinson, who was a huge figure in the American New Thought movement. And get this, even the title, Kybalion, which sounds so ancient and mysterious, seems to be a complete modern invention. It has no known roots in historical languages.
All right, so if the 7 principles are a modern system, does that mean they're totally disconnected from older ideas? Not so fast. Let's see if we can kind of reconcile the ancient roots with this newer form.
There's definitely a clear thematic link. For instance, the Kybalion's super famous Principle of Correspondence, as above, so below. That's a direct echo of a line from the much, much older and way more cryptic Emerald Tablet. So these ideas weren't just invented out of thin air in 1912.
So really what we're looking at here is a modern work that drew from this deep, deep well of older esoteric concepts, things like Platonism and alchemy, and then it repackaged them for a 20th century audience. It's better to think of it as an interpreter, maybe, not a direct transcript of some ancient system.
So, what's the legacy of this idea? Especially as it's presented in the Kybalion. Where does that leave us today?
And this, to me, is what's so fascinating. Regardless of where it actually came from, the book's clear, practical framework has had a massive, massive influence. The idea that you can master your own mental state, that's incredibly powerful. And it's given this principle a lasting appeal in modern self-help and spiritual circles all over the world.
Which I guess leaves us with one final question to chew on. If an idea gives you a key to self-mastery, does its origin really matter? If a principle, whether it's truly ancient or totally modern, gives us a practical tool to change our lives for the better, what's more important, its historical pedigree or its actual power in the here and now? That's definitely something to think about.